Now, your family have been through all of this in Europe, and today we've seen on October the 7th this terrible, terrible massacre that took place here in Israel. And now from that we're seeing a lot of anti-Semitism in Europe. Have we learnt any lessons, and do you think Jews that are living in Europe today should actually leave and come here to Israel?
That's a big question. Can I add a chapter that I forgot, very little? When my father came from the Bricha, he went back to the kibbutz. He was in the kibbutz. He went back to his kibbutz, and in 1946, suddenly, very suddenly, Poland opened its border for Jews. Jews could leave Poland. So he was called again to Poland. 1956. 1956. Gomulka's government, he was the head of the government, opened its borders. So in Israel there was a bureau that's called Nativ, which also means a way. Nativ is a way, a route. A Nativ bureau was also a hush-hush bureau, dealing with the Jews behind the Iron Curtains, all the Soviet and the other countries. So Poland was the first one that actually opened its border, and my father was sent there, this time to the embassy as a diplomat with formal diplomatic passport, but actually he was working for Nativ, and his main job was to help Jews, also Jews who came from Russia now, to come to Israel. So his mission in life was to help Jews, to save Jews where it's difficult, in countries where they were suffering, and if they wanted to come to Israel, to help them come to Israel. Now to your question. I think there's a really huge difference between the Bricha time and the times now, also Nativ time. The difference is that we have a country, in the family of the countries of the world. We are a nation and accepted as a nation in the family of nations. During the Bricha, we weren't. There was no Jewish nation. Just to give an example, and that's a story about the British. There was this British DP camp, displaced persons camp, and a few soldiers, British soldiers with British uniform, but Jewish. They were the Jewish brigade soldiers. One of them was an officer, came to this DP camp and went to the commander of the camp. He received them properly because they were British soldiers, and asked if he has Jewish survivors in the camp. And he said, no, I have no Jews. So can we walk in the camp? Can we visit the camp? Yes, go ahead, visit the camp. So they visited the camp, and they went back to his office and said, why did you say you have no Jews? You have more than 100. You have close to 200 Jews. So he told them, listen, my mission is to send displaced persons back to their countries. And you see on my wall, there's a chart. I send Poles to Poland, Germans to Germany, Russians to Russia, Ukrainians to Ukraine. Do I have a Judea country? For me, there are no Jews. Either they're Poles or they're Germans or no Jews. And I send them to their countries. And actually, quite a few times, Jews were forcibly and violently put on lorries and sent back, usually to Poland.
Which is where the Holocaust was.
So, and if the British caught, for example, I have a story also of the Jewish brigade person. He was a sergeant, and he was given, and he said, he was asked by his Bricha handler, and he said, when my Bricha handler asks me, that's a command, to have 60 lorries. At noon exactly, at the train station in Treviso, which is a country in the north of Italy, on the border of Austria. I didn't know why he asked me, so that was an order, and I had 60 lorries. I couldn't have enough of the British ones, so I asked some American ones. I even had a black driver on this group. And it turned out that there was a train of 800 Jews that the Bricha had managed to put in the train from Germany to Italy. The British at the beginning thought they were Italians going back to Italy. When they realized they were Jews, they gave the master of the train station, an order to turn, as the train arrives, to put a new train engine and send them back to Germany. The whole train, as with all 800 Jews back to Germany. So this corporal, Jewish British corporal from the brigade says, we came one by one. The trains went in the station very quickly. Each one got 30 people or so. Another one. By the time train station master came to send the train back to Germany, there were no Jews in the train station. Of course, now the Jewish brigade people had 800 people to take care of, which they were not prepared for. Food and lodgings and so forth. And they did, taking their own food and their own blankets and tents and so forth. But the point was that the British were going to send back Jews who had managed to arrive to Italy to Germany, because
the British were actually a hindrance to the Jewish people, and I imagine many, many Jews died because of the way that the British were acting at the time.
Well, that's going too far. The British were a great hindrance. They understood. They weren't stupid. They knew every Jew traveling in routes of Europe was potentially a ma'apil who was going to Israel, at least potentially. So they tried to stop. And I have letters from the foreign ministry and from the government, for example, to the Foreign Office, the Polish Foreign Office, reprimanding them. Why do you let Jews go out of your country? Which they didn't, but Jews did go out. And there were MI5 and the MI6 and the Secret Service of the Army and the Secret Service of the colonies and the Secret Service of the Israel and the area here. Was all of them were working to find out about Jews traveling in Europe. They were joining efforts, all of them, to intelligence was the word I was talking about. Many intelligence bureaus, British, were working and there was an intelligent person in every border station, British intelligence, to catch the Jews. They didn't cause their death. And I think interesting and lucky for us and unlucky for Britain is that they had a lot of information. They actually knew a lot. I have an article written by a British Secret Service person to a very important journal, professional journal, saying, what did the British know about the Bricha? And at the end he says that they knew pretty much everything, most of the things. And they had operations, intelligence operation on the Jews, and they would people in the Bricha groups to find out how they work. And they really worked hard. But the policy was wrong. I mean, they didn't have much choice. The British policy was that the Jewish refugee problem in Europe is a European problem. Europeans made it, and Europeans should take care of it. And it has nothing to do with Palestine. It had everything to do with Palestine. So with the ships, they only 8 illegal survivors ships made their way to, the first 8, made their way through the British blockade. Other 58 ships all were caught by the British Navy because they had the intelligence and they could stop the ships and take the survivors to camps in Cyprus to hold them. Again, behind barbed wire, again with watchtowers and soldiers. So the intelligence for the Hapala was there, the ships, and the ability of the army to work on the intelligence was there. With the Bricha, there was intelligence, and there was a lot of effort put into the gathering the information. But they couldn't do much because they'd ordered the government of Germany not to let Jews in or not to let Jews out. Everybody was happy to get the Jews out, and sometimes the Bricha paid the government. So they were happy. Get the Jews out. Yeah. We get the Jews out. We make the British angry, which is nice. We make the British embarrassed, which is nice. And we're very happy. So the British had no good plan what to do with the information they had. I must say, the British were careful also with the ships. They were not really violent. They weren't letting Jews come to Israel, but they weren't killing them. They didn't want them. They would have liked them to disappear, which they didn't. Like the Arab population want us from Israel now to do. If we could evaporate, that would be very happy. But we're not evaporating. But they didn't kill them. They made it much harder. And they made us use a lot of more ingenuity and find ways to organize the journey, to carry out the plans for the journey, the idea of a journey. But they didn't care. Not really.